All right, I'm going to switch to English again. I hope you enjoy the coffee break. And now we're going to continue. We have two more presentations before we go into the round table. And we're going to start with someone who I think is one of the most incisive researchers in regarding the whole issue of nature and sustainability, Giles Atkinson, who happens to be the director of the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics. For those of you that are not familiar, the Grantham Research Institute is one of the foremost research institutes in the world in terms of research on climate change. And within the LSE, we have the area that deals fundamentally with the policy dimension of climate change. And he's also a professor of environmental policy at the LSE. He's going to be talking about nature and sustainability, measurement and policy for a greener transition. So without further ado, Giles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andreas. It's an honor to be here, so thank you very much for the invitation. As Andreas said, I'm going to talk about nature and sustainability, measurement and policy. It tends to be the area that I've been working on for many years now, as well as my Grantham Research Institute affiliation at London School of Economics. I'm also a member of our new Global School of Sustainability, and we have a nature theme within that Global School of Sustainability at LSE, and I'm leading that theme. So I'll just give you a little bit of the flavour of the sort of work that involves. I suppose my first question is, well, what is the role of nature restoration and natural capital in the green transition? So, we've heard about climate change this morning. We've heard about chemicals, the employment implications as well. What do people think of the transition to? I want to talk a bit more specifically about the role of nature and natural capital here. It is intertwined with the climate dimension. So I think there's three reasons, essentially, for this emphasis on nature and natural capital. The first is that there's a clear link to climate mitigation. So you have carbon storage and carbon removal services provided by nature. So there's a clear link to our ambitions with regards to climate policy and limiting the amount of carbon dioxide that ends up in the atmosphere. There's also another link to climate versus adaptation as well. So nature-based solutions essentially are another and a really important response to the adaptation that we need because we're committed probably to quite significant climate change already. And those nature-based solutions can complement the traditional engineering solutions that we might have for that adaptation problem. So essentially contributing to the resilience of our economies. The third reason I would say is that we have a self-standing nature crisis which deserves attention in its own right as part of the green transition. So nature, biodiversity supports our economies, it supports our well-being. Nature supports other assets that we have in the economy as well. So it's incredibly important and I think deserves this attention in its own right. I'm going to talk about policies here with regards to what policies we need to consider nature in the transition. But I'm going to talk in particular about measurement as really a key building block of any sort of policy, particular accounting approaches which try to build better understanding of how natural capital contributes to our economies. I'm going to provide a range of illustrations and then I'll circle back to the issue of policy questions. Okay, I suppose I should start initially with defining what natural capital is. Well, there's a variety of definitions. There's really broad definitions, so very general understandings of natural capital. So a few years ago, I was a member of something called the UK Natural Capital Committee. It was an independent body, but it was set up by the UK government at the time. We had a really broad definition of natural capital. Essentially, it was everything in nature that provides benefits to people. There's more practical definitions as well. they tend to focus and distinguish between assets, natural assets such as non-renewable resources. So those are traditional things like minerals and energy resources, but also renewable natural capital as well. So living things in nature or aspects of nature that can regenerate. And in particular, when we talk about renewable natural capital now, we tend to be referring to ecosystems, essentially habitats in our natural world. There's other understandings of what natural capital does as well. So you can think of it as being a component of the wealth portfolio that any nation and the planet has. So it's another class of asset to add to our produced assets, our human capital, and so on and so forth. But also it's more fundamental than that as well, because it does support the rest of the economy as well, and it supports those other assets. So in that regards, it's really natural infrastructure that we're talking about with regards to natural capital too. So those are the definitions. How do we manage natural capital? There's a picture on the right-hand side of the slide, taken from a recent book by Ed Barbier. And this is just essentially to visualize some of the broad decisions that we have with regards to how we manage natural capital. So there's things that we might want to avoid. So we might want to avoid bumping up against thresholds and planetary boundaries. You start moving too much towards those thresholds, then very bad, possibly catastrophic outcomes for economic development might occur. So an easy decision for policymakers should be avoid going near to those planetary boundaries, and understanding what those boundaries are is clearly crucial too. But where we locate ourselves on the other side, on the safe side of those boundaries, is really a societal decision. So it takes into account not just expertise, technocratic information in the policy process, but also what people in society want from their economies and their social life as well. So that's what's meant in this picture in terms of the safe operating space. How much of nature should be conserved? Well, really, this is a social decision, albeit stay away from those boundaries. The thing I would say with regards to policy, once we've made a decision about how much natural capital we should be conserving, essentially we're setting ourselves a target, and policy is about then how do we hit that particular target. But what I want to also emphasize is that even before we've thought about the policies that might get us towards our natural capital targets, we have to think about how we measure those goals, how we measure the natural capital in the first place, whereby we're going to evaluate our progress via our policies towards those natural capital objectives. And this is really where this measurement of natural capital accounting comes in. So I want to say a few words about that in the next slide. So natural capital accounting, what is it? Well, it means many things. The terminology has changed over the years, but at its core, what the contemporary literature and practitioners call natural capital accounting is essentially ecosystem accounting. So it's accounting for what's happening in ecosystems across the world. So it's looking at ecosystem services. So these are goods and services provided by nature that we consume in our economies. And these ecosystem services are provided by ecosystem assets. So what's an ecosystem asset? Well, essentially, it's an ecosystem type or a broad habitat. So it could be a woodland, it could be a mountain or moor, it could be some form of wetland, a coastal ecosystem. Many types of these habitat types. Also, these natural capital accounts, they look at ecosystem condition as well. So this is the state of the ecosystem asset, essentially. So we're interested in two things here. One is the extent of ecosystem assets and natural capital. How much land do we have in these particular ecosystem types, but also the quality of those ecosystems as well. And that's where indicators of condition are really crucial here. How's this connected to particular activities? Well, there's two broad activities here. One is national level natural capital accounting. That's connected to things like the beyond GDP, gross domestic product debate, tied to what's happening in national accounts. So building better national balance sheets that reflect what's happening to natural capital in our national economies. But there's also a strong tradition emerging of corporate natural capital accounting as well, where you've got corporate actors who are constructing their own natural capital accounts, taking into account their own activities. Why might they be motivated to do that? Well, probably two reasons. Corporates are often concerned about their supply chains. So where upstream you're relying on natural capital or biodiversity for your production activities, you might want to monitor what's happening in that supply chain. But also landowners, land managers are interested increasingly in the ecosystem services that they're producing on the land that they own or the land that they manage. Now, why are they interested in that? Possibly they have altruistic motives, but also they're thinking about financializing those assets as well. So these are novel goods and services provided by the natural world. By and large, they're intangible. They're things we enjoy that service our economies, but they're not. Their value isn't evident in an obvious way, but increasingly landowners, land managers are looking at novel ways of trying to financialize those flows in order to capture the value that they are producing. So this is where policy comes in as well. You've got traditional policy responses, planning and regulation systems essentially. National policymakers saying, you can't do this on your land, you have to protect nature. But increasingly, these financial instruments are being used in this space. So essentially financializing some of these ecosystem services and natural capital that farmers, other landowners, land managers are custodians of in effect. Okay, I'm going to talk about a few examples of natural capital accounting. I'm just going to set the scene by saying a little bit about a cross-country study which has been going for since 1997, conducted by the World Bank, called the Changing Wealth of Nations reports. So there's been about 5 or 6 reports over that period that the World Bank has published, including one last year, on essentially the wealth and natural capital that's held by economies. And each of these publications, essentially what the World Bank is, it provides a bit more novelty to what it's done previously. And I'm just prefacing some of the country studies that I'm going to illustrate in a moment by saying, actually, one of the things that World Bank did in its last Changing Wealth of Nations report was provide a study which measured the carbon stocks in vegetation across countries. So again, a link to the climate change dimension of the green transition here. So what this study did was look at all of the carbon stocks that were implied in the mapped vegetation around the world, in the world's forests, its agricultural ecosystems, and so on. So just to provide scope that this work is worldwide, but also it involves really granular detail and spatial mapping. There's a real physical dimension to this, mapping where all this vegetation, all these trees are, assessing the degree of carbon that's in this vegetation, and then coming up with a neat map such as in the picture. So it's an incredible amount of detail that's done with this work. But the broad idea is, well, these carbon stocks in this vegetation, they're in nature rather than in the atmosphere. They're part of the wealth of economies. They're part of our planetary wealth, and we need to account for that to make better decisions about how we manage all this carbon in our natural world. Okay, let me provide you some examples. So that's a global picture, but there is an increasingly large literature which is looking at country-level studies and regional-level studies. So I start off with one from Spain. This is a group of researchers that have been looking at the forests in Andalusia for many, many years. Pablo Campos and his colleagues, and this was a publication that they that they published in 2019. So essentially, what are they trying to do here? Well, they're trying to provide a natural capital account for the ecosystem services provided by the forest natural capital in the region of Andalusia. And essentially, these accounts are doing incredibly detailed work, but for us, the interest is, well, what stories can they tell us to help us understand a bit more about what we need with regards to the transition? So what's the story here, essentially? Well, there's two different categories of ecosystem service that these researchers were looking at. One is the on-site ecosystem services. So these are the ecosystem services that are produced by the farmers, the people that own the forest land in this region, and they're consumed by those farmers and the owners of that forest land. So that's the products that they're producing and they're selling in a market. Or it's the amenity value. Landowners enjoy the natural capital themselves. It's providing them with well-being on their land. But there's also ecosystem services which are produced on that same land, but they're consumed and they're used in another part of the economy. So those users are essentially downstream, off-site from where those ecosystem services are produced. And this includes carbon, it includes biodiversity, it also includes recreation as well. And you can see here perhaps that these off-site ecosystem services are just as important, actually here a little bit more important than the on-site ecosystem services. And the link to policy is that, well, we might need to try to monetize, financialize these off-site ecosystem services to incentivize landowners to take them into account when they're making land use, land management decisions on their own land. So some sort of financial instrument, for example. I'll just take how much time? 5 minutes. Okay, so I'll skip over these two slides. Another example then is essentially looking at flood control regulation. So different type of ecosystem service here, but essentially one that maps on to the adaptation story. And in what way can nature-based solutions provide us with connections to making our economies more resilient in the face of increasing climate change risks. So this is a cross-European Union study which looked at the degree to which natural land across the European Union was providing flood control services. Now, clearly, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the round table. But what this study tried to do was quantify how much land was actually providing these ecosystem services, how much land was it protecting, and what was the economic value of that protection that was provided to these downstream users of those ecosystem services. So this is essentially the story that we're looking at in this picture here. You have these flood control services which are protecting around about 42,000 square kilometres of land across the European Union, providing a benefit, protecting economic assets. That benefit was reckoned to be about 16 billion euros. There's different sectors that are benefiting from those flood protection services. So a lot of agricultural land enjoys protection from flooding because of the flood protection services of natural capital, but actually the value is relatively low in the scheme of things. Less land is being protected for households, but the value of that is incredibly high. Yeah, why is that? Well, we live in urban areas that are being protected. The value of those assets are correspondingly high. So again, you can tell a story through these natural capital accounts that have a connection to policy. It's not telling all of the story, because I'm sure one of the things that we'll talk about in the round table is that this isn't just about protecting economic assets, protecting our buildings, protecting our structures. There are risks to human life that also need to be factored into what these flood protection services are, and clearly This is known all too well from the tragedy that happened last year. I'll just mention another connection to policy here. 2 minutes, Andreas? Okay. And then there's a conclusion. So an England example, we have something in England called the biodiversity net gain policy, where essentially developers, you want to build a house, you're building that house on natural land, you need to demonstrate to regulators that you've got biodiversity net gain there, that you're not destroying more biodiversity than you create. So one way that developers, house builders have, is essentially to pay money into a fund which can finance investment in natural capital elsewhere. And there's a report that my institute, Grantham Research Institute, published late last year, which looked at the degree to which, well, maybe some of those investments should be in nature-based solutions that increase flood protection services as well. So there's an argument about, well, we're raising finance this way. These developers are paying for these investments. How can we use these investments in order to protect us, make our economies more resilient? Okay, conclusions. Why is natural capital crucial for the green transition? Well, I've mentioned those 3 reasons, and they're just repeated here. Climate mitigation, climate adaptation. Nature benefits in their own right are really important. Natural capital accounts are really crucial here, but essentially what they're doing is demonstrating value. So these examples that I've shown are essentially stories about, well, demonstrating the value of natural capital in our economies. The connection to policy is equally crucial, and that's about allowing economic actors to capture the value of ecosystem services that they produce. And that might be through all sorts of novel financial instruments connected to carbon markets, where you could sell money through nature bonds, etc. I'll make a connection, just last word, to Andreas's opening talk. Just as we need a just transition in climate and energy, we also need it in the nature case as well. And that applies to users of ecosystem services. So who really benefits from these services? How's that distributed? But also the supply as well. So some landowners are wealthier than others. And if we're financializing these assets, maybe we need to think about the wealth distribution implications of that as well. And on that, I will finish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giles, for raising quite a lot of very interesting points. Any quick questions coming from the audience? Yes, please.
Iciar Castelló, and I'm professor at Bayes Business School in the UK. You mentioned very interesting words: climate mitigation, climate adaptation. And the world is changing. So my question, and we all know that there is kind of a new negative kind of wave of understanding sustainability from very important geopolitical actors. My question to you is how much your research in the Grantham Institute or the new perspective that you are taking with your researchers are kind of switching from climate mitigation to climate adaptation?
I think the genuine answer is that there's a balance here. There always has been a balance. I'm not talking about Grantham Research Institute, but just generally in the climate change community. There's maybe a reticence to talk about adaptation because it took people's eyes off the true prize, which is mitigation. That's changing now because essentially we have to adapt. There is no option because there will be some climate change that essentially we are committed to currently, and we also need to adapt. So some of these things are coming into alignment. I mean, it's interesting, there is this pushback with regards to the global climate debate, but I think that there's aspects here of nature-based solutions and the adaptation story, which is, well, you have to adapt. Let's make these investments come with co-benefits as well. You have invest in nature for flood protection services. There's so many other benefits that you get as well, because this is an asset that provides multi-dimensional benefits to society. And I think that's a story that is well known for many years, but it's one that we need to continue sending that message across.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Giles. We'll have more time to discuss all these issues when we have the debate.